I guess. Thank you very much for joining me.
Hello.
Are you well?
I'm very, very well.
Are you good? So let's talk about it. 83 trillion USD that is being transferred. And I guess I'll start with you, Verona. Let's talk about when we say the great wealth transfer, what exactly is it?
Well, I guess it's got to do with the fact that, a group of people or a generation of people have accumulated wealth, and eventually, their lifespan ends, and so they have to transfer this money over to the next generation. And about 60% of that wealth transfer gets lost in that generation. It only, once you get to the third generation, there's only about 20 to 30% left. And so it's about understanding that if you're going to be able to get that money, what are you going to do with it? How are you going to, double it or even threefold it? But it's about keeping enough for the next generation. But what we do have a problem with is that the psychology of money throughout those generations are different. And so the way that we view money and our priorities for different generations affects how long we keep that money and what we do with it. And so that's a major problem. And in South Africa, the Gini coefficient is 0.67 at the moment. So there's huge disparity between the rich and the poor. We're still, working towards getting that right. But at the moment, are we using that money that we've got in terms of the transfer to be able to improve the lives of all South Africans? And is that one of our priorities, being in the generation that you're currently in?
And speaking about disparities, I like what you were touching on there, because Zim, if we look at even some of the audiences that are primarily your audiences, or the people that you generally have a conversation, I know you talk to almost every single person, right? These disparities that Verona is speaking to would then say to me that the great wealth transfer is not relatable and relevant for all of us.
Yeah, it's so tricky, right? Because what's also core to understand is that, just adding to what Verona is saying, there's another aspect of the wealth transfer, and it has to do with small businesses, which I think offer a certain outlet for people who have found a little bit of a nest egg, or they've created a little bit of a nest egg. The people who were running the businesses at the onset of democracy were probably in their 20s, late 20s, early 30s. That was 30 plus years ago. People are retiring now. So even where people have maybe accumulated a little bit more in their life, in their working life, there are opportunities to get into mom and pop businesses as an owner, not even as an operator. So those exist as well. But just touching on the amount of money that we have that's, I think, not being stimulated and could actually help us in the economy. You've got about 6 trillion rands in assets under management from the top 20 asset companies. You've got 1.5 trillion that's sitting in South African corporates and businesses that's not being invested, and there's trillions that we can't even measure that's sitting in trusts. So there is also this aspect of saying we need more money flowing in to the economy so that people can get more. But when it comes to particularly the struggles and the gaps, the one thing about South Africa is that we focus a lot on what we don't have rather than what we have. And the middle class and the people who are actively investing or trying to save and invest, they also look at people who are in the upper classes and think that that's what they need to be doing in order for them to get financially free or to start and to set a base for themselves. And this is incorrect. You've got to start where you are. And it's not a cliche. Most people don't understand the money coming in and going out of their accounts. And it starts there, because you can only save and invest if you know how much is coming in and where the wastages and the leakages are. The disparities when it comes to this generational wealth transfer will start with a generation actually changing its habits and doing the right things in order to build wealth for the next generation.
And it's that particular generation that starts from scratch. That starts from scratch to say, I'm going to be able to just get that little bit extra, just a little bit. Start at the beginning and work yourself up. And with us, to be able to teach the next generation that this is how it's done, because we look at those that have made it, and they drive the fancy cars, they wear the fancy suits, and we want to be like that so quickly, not realizing the hard work and the little steps that are taken in order to get there. And so our role in society is to be able to first implement it in our own lives and show the results of our hard work, but also teach this to the next generation, that it's not just instantaneous, because that's what they're looking for, instant gratification.
Perhaps maybe let's add on to the definition of the wealth transfer. Let's move it away from tangible, actual hardcore money company assets, and talk about the workspaces, right? Decisions are moving now to your manager is now 30. You know, the person is making actual decisions within the company. How does that translate to different types of cultures that will now need to be created within organizations?
Well, so Nicolette, it's the first time in history that 5 generations work together. I mean, some of us cannot even live together with the different generation, you know. But now you have the different ways of dealing with conflict, different ways of, you know, interpreting their work culture. So you find the traditionalists, for example, those are in your 70s, and they very, you know, work ethic is very important. So you get your millennials. And then before them you get your boomers, and after them you get your Gen Zs. And majority are within your millennial range and your Gen Zs. And so what happens is that you've got one particular work ethic. You know, you have to be at work on time. You have to deliver these outputs which need to be tangible. Whilst your Gen Zs want freedom of expression, you know, be able to have freedom within a framework, and that's the best way that they operate. But more importantly, their benefits are very important, the way that they view money. So your traditionalists, for example, medical aid is very important, because as you get older, the more sicker you're going to get and the more you're going to need those benefits. Retirement funding and group risk benefits are very important. Whilst your Gen Zs that's not a priority for me at the moment. What I want to do is be able to spend my money traveling. I want to have these side hustles. I want to be able to have the freedom within the framework. And the millennials are between them. So from a financial advisor perspective, we want to be able to offer benefits, group benefits that speak to the needs of each individual. Otherwise, you're going to have utilization issues. It's going to be grudge purchases. People are going to fall out of the system. And so you're not going to be able to achieve what you set out to achieve, what your objectives. And so understanding the different generations and their view on money, the philosophy of money, will be able to give us an insight as to what we can do to offer an employee benefit. An employee benefit needs to actually benefit the employee, not the employer. You want to make them happy at the office. So how is it? I mean, we did a survey the other day, and it's interesting that some people want PlayStation credits over retirement fund benefits.
And you know what?
Things are changing. Things are changing.
Absolutely.
And so having that insight will be able to give us more engaged employees. Because, and understanding the philosophy, you know, and it's quite interesting that this different generations grew up with different shared experiences. So you'd find your millennials, for example, their parents, both of them started working. So they were left at home or left alone for a long period of time. Yes, and those devices was the introduction of the internet. So what happened? They found their own feet.
TV games.
And TV, Mario Brothers. And so at that point in time...
Stop it.
At that point in time, that's where most of the entrepreneurs came from. Because they had an entrepreneurial mindset which said, let's explore this, let's understand this differently. While the boomers before them were very risk averse. They went to their 9 to 5. It was the most important thing ever. Education was the most important, because through education you'd get up the ranks. And so they were very risk averse. Well, millennials are more, you know, they're not so bad with risk. But your Gen Zs, because the millennials have provided this platform, they're not worried about risk at all.
I think just to add to that, it's so interesting when you talk about like types of benefits. I recently took my young staff to a concert, to the Travis Scott concert, and I got them tickets. And it's this beneficiation that has to change because of the intergenerational sort of nature of the office. The other thing around that is the use of technology, when and where and how. So a big friction point that we've had in terms of work culture is the work from home, right? And it depends on the industry. That's what I've noticed, because I've got friends who are in the built environment, I've got ourselves in the media and sort of like the tech space, and others. It depends, because if you've got ideation, group ideation, it still works better in person. So, but then task-based exercises, your shared services, your HRs, your ops, that's more admin-based, that can be done anywhere. So it's also this understanding intergenerationally what makes Bob from accounting feel comfortable to say that the business is running well, but the people from marketing who are a lot younger are always out and about, and then they're like, why do I need to go to the office if I'm already going to go shoot this thing there? So all of this starts to kind of it becomes a mixing and melting pot that is kind of scary. And then that's the financial decisions that take place around that, in terms of how do you do career planning? How do you add the finance part of it into a structure that doesn't cripple the business? Because maybe that particular person who is in marketing, who's in sales, works differently from the person who needs to be in the office to actually work a lot more streamlined. So this mix has created so many challenges for businesses, but also for the employees. How do I talk about my raise, right? How do I, if I'm a work from home?
Yeah, because Gen Z is going to walk into an office with a lot of people and just say it. I need a raise.
I need a raise, yes. So all of these patterns are exactly what you speak of.
Yeah.
It's the wealth, it's a wealth transfer, but it's also a work transfer.
Yeah. That's it, yeah. Yes.
And I want to stay with you, Zim, and just talk a little bit about what do you think we're going to see in the next couple of years? Because in my head, I'm just thinking for wealth to be created, policy needs to be changed, work culture needs to be changed, right? A conversation about my salary or my or how much increment I'm getting is now a conversation when we're sitting at lunch. It's no longer I need to set up a meeting. You know, HR must bring out KPIs. I'm not going to tell you. I'm going to point it out. I've got a portfolio. Here it is. What do you see the younger generation who are going to be the managers? What type of policies are they going to be bringing that will help in wealth creation? That's
so true. I think we are in a transitional phase, and I think one of the most important things that's happening right now is the way that HR stopped being HR and became human capital.
Yes.
Right? That's a start. So what that kind of said or postured to a lot of employees was that you are an asset-based component of this business.
Yes.
Thus, the conversations that we have, they differ. I've always believed that when it comes to an employee who is looking for a raise, looking for a little bump up, looking for those extra bits of benefits, I think that it's always easier to quantify exactly what value you bring. A lot of people don't know their story at work.
Yes.
They don't know that as this particular lead coordinator for this division, yes, it's a big business, but my unit, if you were to bring the work that flows through my office and my 3, 4, 5 people, it's worth 50 million rand a year to this business. So for my unit to only have X, Y, Z, and for us to not be remunerated based off the work that we do and the output that we're able to sustainably get out the business is not fair. So, and the reason I know this is that in banking, it's a lot more easier, but because they work with numbers. So banks are actually internally very small, tight teams. It looks like a big bank, but you've got the guys that trade and they've got their 500 million that they trade as 4 people. So they know that we get remunerated on what we're able to get out here.
Our output.
So even salespeople are easy to remunerate and add commission space, because they basically say in sales, I eat what I kill. So I can't eat if I don't go out hunting. So now we've got to say, what about those people that work in the office? What about the marketing person?
Events.
What about the events person? You can then start to say, how much business am I handling? So if you are working in a tech space and you say, well, I know that our business does 5 million rand every single month. And of that 5 million rand, there are 3 leads who do the work. I can work out how many projects we've worked on to cover up this 5 million. So maybe my business or unit ended up as a developer with my 2 junior developers. We ended up doing 3 million rands every single month. And those other 2 guys are doing 1 and 1. But maybe their projects are seen as being more complex, but the volume is me. Now, when you go to your seniors, you've got tangible proof and empirical evidence that I move more money in this business. Thus, we should have a different conversation around a profit share based off work handled outside of it. Because what if it falls flat? Yes, I do my work well, but what if I hit those deadlines relative to the client being in a particular way? So the transfer of things and generational transfers, it really matters in how we now discuss how businesses profit share with their staff internally on the upside, just as much as when the downside is there, they'll say, guys, we've got to
tighten our belts.
We have to tighten our belts and we have to let some people go. So the businesses have to give and take as well.
Is HR ready for that?
Not as yet.
Okay.
Not as yet. Where we do see employee benefits going towards is the travel, is the entrepreneur part of it, the profit sharing, the technology base, those type of things. And actually what you were saying is so true, because now we can quantify the value we offer to the organization. And those conversations are different. And so you expect employers to be able to understand your value and remunerate you accordingly. Because choice is so prevalent. You know, Gen Zs can get up tomorrow and say, I'm not going to work. I've actually got, the whole world is my oyster, and I can do anything I want to do. And so it's a mutually beneficial relationship where both win in the process.
Let's talk about that. I mean, if the median age in South Africa of a worker is 28, what exactly are companies missing in terms of adjusting and creating benefits that are going to be suitable for their workforce?
I think before we get to the benefits part, one of the very important points to remember is that the older generations have a wealth of experience within the organizations. And because there's a bit of a communication gap between the way that they communicate between generations, that skill transfer is very needed. And so you find that interprets into value by the employee. So they're feeling now, the Gen Zs and the millennials are feeling, am I adding value? Whilst these people have the head knowledge and they're holding on to it but not transferring it. So we have to be able to do skills transfer, to be able to make sure that people who work in the organization can produce that value and feel valued and important, and because it's all about value. Millennials and Gen Zs want to add value. That's their bottom line.
Now before you answer my question, the question now is, how do you translate now what's in Zimasa's head to his younger staff?
So I wanna just ask the first question and then I'll jump into the quick one. So I think that there needs to be a hybrid situation where, yes, we could have, the business offers you leave, and then there's work days. I think in between there have to be hybrid days and work away from the office, work from home days. And they have to be quantifiable to the business, that you're not here but you're working. So you have to be on call. That's how you start to bridge the gap. Because remember that the young people who started working 5 years ago now, who maybe they may have been 25, are now 30. They're the managers that you talk of. Now, they
started during COVID.
100%. They work in a new way of working, in a new world. So to them, how you create more value in this business is to say, maybe the business doesn't have that much fat to give more. But what if we gave you 2 weeks of work from anywhere in the world? Suddenly that young Gen Alpha, that younger millennial goes, that's cool.
Yes,
now I can actually work out and say, okay, I've got my leave days, that's maybe a week or a week and a half or 2 weeks. And then I've got this 2 weeks, that's work from anywhere. I can for a month go to wherever I want to in the world, connect, plug in, and still do the work. This is how dynamic businesses have to be to offer those opportunities to work.
So the only downside on that is that as your manager, being a boomer or a traditionalist, wants to see you.
They want meetings.
And say, because you are not at the office,
you are not working.
You are not working. Yet statistics have shown that if you're working from home, you take more meetings than you actually do. Because you really need to show your bosses, actually, you know what, I'm here 24/7, I'm on the line, and you work longer hours because you're more comfortable, and it's also sharing some time with your family that's important.
You're working through lunch.
Yes, that's the thing. So dropping the kid off at school whilst just sitting in traffic, as opposed to sitting in traffic to get to the office, is so important to the younger generations. And so that's where human capital comes in, because they must be able to find that
and understand
sweet
those nuances
spot between the two. You know, so they can enforce policy on behalf of your boomers and your traditionalists in order to make the millennials happy, and also be able to monitor those proceedings to make sure that there's not abuse in the system.
I want to tell you a story. I changed so much when I started having employees. Like, I was chilled. Then I got employees and I got upset when I don't see them. Because I was like, you're wasting my money. But what I realized about me was that I didn't know how to delegate correctly. So sometimes I just wanted to see them even though they were not working. It's just seeing them because I'm paying for office space. So you better be in the office, you know.
Doing office stuff.
Do something, you know, move paper around. Change paper in the printer, right? And I think that's also something that I think it's a mindset that needs to change from when you are an employer. having a relationship with an employee.
And I think the dynamics you speak of are so important when you understand those workplace dynamics, you understand when you have to deal with compensation dynamics and remuneration dynamics. Because ultimately, from a financial perspective, people want to know that they're getting their worth relative to value that they're adding. And I think with the older generations, what they did was that they knew that there was a clear path to management. I remember many years ago, I was at at the breweries, and they were doing an event, and there were people that had done 40 years there. And they knew that when they started and you speak to them, they knew that no, I was always going to work at breweries. So the world is now more dynamic, and the ability to move around is even more insane for businesses and human capital to understand. So the dynamism of being able to remunerate people relative to the prevailing conditions in the workplace starts to bridge that gap of like lack of clarity, because you could see people in the office and maybe they're not enthused to be at the office. So for instance, working in a more, I would say, vibey space, coming from media, we always knew that Fridays were chilled Fridays. 12 o'clock, everything is chilled. You know, it's a much more chilled environment. No one takes any meetings. No one schedules meetings after 12. People are walking around the agencies. They're understanding themselves. There's things coming out. There's party packs every Friday, so that you can de-stress. So that's what in the advertising space, that's what they would do. But there's also a balance to say Monday to Thursday, it's hard graft. And if we happen to push up until 6, 7, 8 on a Wednesday, it is what it is, because the business takes and it gives back.
That's it. And so the pizza days it no longer cuts it.
No.
And if you're going to, as an employer or even as a leader, be able to offer incentives to your staff, it needs to come from a very sincere place. Because the Gen Zs and the Gen Alphas they can see through everything. So you have to be very sincere when you offer those, that you genuinely care. Otherwise, you're missing the plot completely on that.
Does the younger force trust financial institutions?
Yes and no.
I would agree.
I'd say yes and no. I think as sort of like a mid-millennial myself, I've probably maybe really been in contact with no more than 4 traditional banks in my entire life. And for, I think, if I take after when I became financially sort of like independent, free from my parents, it's maybe 2. It's maybe 2 institutions really that I've worked with. So our understanding.
When you say work with, you mean engage on a personal, own personal stuff?
Personal as well as business.
Yes.
And when you're younger, you're tied to your parents because you want the money to clear immediately. So if your mom is with a red bank, you want to be with a red bank.
Yes.
Yeah, if it's a green bank, it's a green bank. I think that when it then moves on, there are key moments, financial and life moments that offer opportunities where you deal with institutions. One, you're getting into varsity. My personal experience is that when I got to UJ, on sort of like the first month, there was a bank there. It was a red bank. They were there on campus every single day. And then eventually I was like, hey, let me go get let me listen to what they have to say. And then they had me for 10 years. I ended up financing 2 cars with them, etc. So there's that moment. The second moment is when you start to working. Because then your employer, most people will say, when I change to my employer's bank,
25 must be the 25.
Right? That's the first one. Then the next moment is when you get into a serious relationship and you may be living together and you're starting to find there's a little bit of friction between banks when certain things happen. So there's a moment to change there. Then at the same time, you may be in that, you're thinking, we need to get a car, or I need to get a car. Banks matter, and those institutions matter. Then you say, what about my life? Then you're thinking, who do I get a life policy with? Who do I get my monthly investments with, my regime with? So I think for the mid-millennials, there was a fluidity that said, not necessarily because you advertise the most, will I deal with you. It was, life stage will dictate where I end up going, and also the people who flow money into me, they don't have to say it, but they will dictate. Things like those employee benefits. When they say, hey, we do our medical aid with this medical aid, you start to consider that if they're matching more for this medical aid, I might as well find a plan within this space as an employee so that when we do our 50-50 or our 60-40 split, I'm with this one and there's less friction.
Yes.
But that's where I think there's trust relative to who is doing the best for me.
So situation puts you in that trust relationship.
Yes.
Okay.
And it's also generational, because what we find in the employee benefits space, initially, it depends on which location it was. So my mom's a teacher and she was always with a particular medical scheme. Yes. That medical scheme catered for doctors and teachers. So when I first had my experience with going onto a medical aid, I would go to my parents and ask, and they're like, no, this is the one. This is the one. It's for doctors and teachers. That's the one you should go for. What we've seen change according to generations is the gamification and loyalty and rewards that's attached to those institutions. Now people are talking about the e-bucks and they're talking about your discount and your vitality. And the younger generations, it's about gamification, that I want to do something tech-wise and get rewarded for it. So then I get these points, and so that's where they're looking at now. So it's not even about the core benefits anymore. It's about attracting from the gamification.
What's the user experience I get by working with you?
That's it. So it's all about that, what's in it for me, leave alone the core benefits. And so that's where we see the relationships with these particular institutions are headed.
Right, because I want to move to a conversation about the role of independent advice. Because if that's how you are then, or how young people are engaging with financial institutions, it means that they're not getting the benefit of independent advice.
So that's such an interesting conversation, because when I post and have engagements with younger people, they get shocked that I was a particular age and I started to put away 500 Rand a month. It's like, okay, but what made you do that? I was like, well, I think the prevailing conditions around me created the space for me to say, at least let me put away $500. At least. So for them, it's exactly that. It's like, it's a little bit of what are the vibes saying, more than is like what's the tangible sort of outtakes on that. And I mean, there's an insurer who's done this quite well in terms of the vibes. I won't even say the color; you'll know who they are. But they've gone and made it so much about vibes that I've not once heard someone say they're a great insurer, but their ads are so great. It's nice. So it's this friction that exists, where I don't know if people have the patience to vet outside of what they're given anymore. Because the boring work was really great. And I mean, you have to do the boring work up front when it comes to your finances, so that you don't feel hard done by years later when they say, we're going to take X amount of brokerage fees from this thing, and you go, but you never told me. I say, no, but it was there in the fine print. So I think that like a key piece of understanding from people is that do the graft now, and it's easier now with tech tools. You can take AI tools, and there's ones that really work well. Take your monthly statements for the last year, input into AI, and ask it, if you were a certified financial planner, what would you take out of this set of financial statements? What is this person doing well? Where are they overspending? How are they doing? All banks and financial institutions should be giving people this type of advice around what's happening in my account. Outside of me just saying, debits, credits, this is how much I have left, available balance. And I mean, it's the biggest thing in South Africa. It's like, what a balance, available balance. And they fight. They say, I want to withdraw that. I say, no, ma'am, some things haven't cleared. So outside of that, we've got to find a space where we take ownership. And it's become so much easier, so that when you do engage with certified financial planners and people and institutions like ASI, you're able to then say, I've done the pre-work here. Yes. I kind of understand for the last 12 months where I've been losing money, where I could save money, but I want us to then sit and action it. That's where the value of financial institutions still comes in, because you still want to deal with a human.
That's it. And so you make the point about the bank should let you know where your money is going to. If every single time there's a transaction and they get money for it, they're not going to let you know that. So for example, your cell phone provider is not going to tell you you're on the wrong option, because they're benefiting from the fact that
from the extraction.
Yes. So anybody who is a tied agent to a particular financial institution is actually rewarded by means of fees. So the more fees, the richer they get.
Yeah.
So the more commission they would earn. So that's why you need to have an independent financial advisor.
Yeah.
To be able to look at which bank you are with, which insurer you are with. Yes, okay, fine, you might be getting a discount here and there, but how much is that discount? How much is that discount compared to the benefits that you're getting? And is it something that you actually need and utilize? So the beauty of having independent advice is somebody who sits on the outside and says, okay, it's not about me anymore. It's about you as the individual. Where can we save you money? But what's in it for me as the advisor? I have you forever as a client because you trust my advice, and I'm able to tell you where you are going wrong and how you can save this money. For example, those 99 Rand debit orders that go off your bank account that you don't even see, it should flag somewhere on the banking system to say, listen, this is going off your account. You don't even get an SMS or whatever anymore, notification anymore, because it's in the best interest of the bank that it goes off your account. They would get fees for it. So having an independent advisor will be able to tell you, but look, are you aware of this? Are you aware of this plus the fee, and reduce that and be able to save you money in the long run?
But then it's a lost art, because if we go back to how you guys explain the engagement or with financial institutions, almost sometimes it's by design from employer, from parents, how then do you guys break through the noise?
So it's about maintaining our independence and having an objective look at all of the arrangements that you got in place as an individual, as a corporate. Identify where the spend is, identify the duplications. For example, if your company offers you funeral benefits, it's legislated according to law, and all of the acts speak to the fact that there's only 100,000 that they can pay out. But then in your private capacity, you've got these different
7
accounts.
of them.
And your bank also tells you that you have a funeral.
Yes.
So we've been able to actually, save people about 1,200 Rand a month to say, take half of this, pay off your debt. Because if you calculate the interest that comes with your debt, actually it's no use you saving that amount, it's a nil sum. And then take some of that and put it towards retirement fund savings. Which vehicle is going to give you as the consumer the most returns? If I was tied to a particular entity, I would say, give me that full 1,200 Rand, I will get fees on that, and you'll have this return on your investment. But it's not about that. It's about the longevity of the relationship and best advice. We are about building wealth and changing lives. And so core to that particular purpose is making a difference in people's lives in tangible ways.
Zimasa, do you think young people know the difference when they're getting tied advice that is coming from one company and they can only show you what they have versus an independent advisor that's going to show you 5 different meats and say which meat is suitable for you and your cholesterol?
So I don't think people know and understand that, and I'll even give a personal anecdote. I'm currently in the process of changing sort of like my life policy. Now, I'd first obviously engaged with a financial service provider, and maybe it was a little bit of a gamification, and I thought, okay, this is going to make sense for me, and I did that. I didn't benchmark that across what I would possibly get elsewhere. For that same fee, I was able to get 10 times, literally 10 times the value, because I'm chatting to about 3 to 4 different brokers, and they're all giving me a ballpark figure of, let's say, 9 million, 8 million, 10 million. So we're kind of finding each other, and I'm like, but that one was only giving me about 1.
Yes.
1 point something.
Yes.
This one's saying 10.
Yes.
But now I'm talking to 3 different brokers who are saying, no. For the same amount you're paying, and if we add a little bit more, you can be getting 10 million, 8 million. What? And I'm saying for the same thing.
Probably with underwriting too.
100%, yes. So now I'm sitting there going, hold on. There's an entire industry that is there and should be looked at and should be gaining prominence to offer better value for the same exact money. And it's not to say you're going to pay less, you're going to get more value. And that's where I think these conversations are so important to champion that, because this is an anecdote that's happening right now where I'm sitting with these different quotations and I'm saying, Haibo, this one I'm cancelling. This is the last thing. I'm canceling this thing. I'm moving to one of these. We just need to work out on the legalese of it and say, okay, which one's the best one to move forward? But the value proposition, it's not the person who advertises the most to you that might necessarily have the best deal and value for you. And I think that as independents, there needs to be a better conversation from a marketing perspective. And we appreciate conversations like this because they offer a different way of thought. Hey, what do you mean you could get 10 million for the same amount of money you're paying? That a formalized institution that everybody knows markets themselves every day would say, hey, do this, and then you go, these guys are like, no, we can actually get you from this guy. I said, no, but that guy offered me. He said, no, we can go to the same guy and you can get more.
That's it.
It's a marketing campaign, Verona. So it's not we're gonna get you late. You're gonna pay less. You're gonna pay the same, but you're gonna get more value.
More value.
Because I think anybody would take that. I mean, it makes sense. I already have that budget line in my budget, right? I'm willing to pay 900 for life insurance, but I'd rather the 10 million versus 2 million or 500,000.
Yes.
As we're closing off, and I want us to just quickly step into this question, Verona. Statistics, and you alluded to it earlier on, 70% of wealth disappears by the second generation. We've got a huge wealth transfer that is going to happen. What can employers and advisors do to help families preserve it?
Besides the transfer of that wealth, at the moment in South Africa, people are battling just with their salary to make ends meet with their salary. And when we put ourselves between the employer, because we do corporate advisory and we do individual financial planning for the individuals, it's about finding that healthy mix between making your salary sufficient enough for you, because you can't approach the employer to say, give me 2 times, increases during the year. You need to be able to get your salary to last you longer. So it's how about efficiently utilizing, the salary that you've got that comes into your account for non-frivolous expenditure, assisting them with regard to that and teaching them how to spend. The pass rate for public schools in South Africa has been 33% for math for as long as I can remember. And if you're getting people out of that environment without even teaching them to budget, as soon as they've got money, they look at the people that do have money and buy things that they don't need to impress the people that they don't like. And so for us to change that mindset, it's about starting with the corporates who influence the employee, who influences his family, who then influences community. And so it's about education. That's the first thing. And so that's what we do, is we educate people how to budget. Is it okay to take a car and hire purchase? What is the risks involved in that? Do we rent or own a home? Are you thinking about investments? What type of investments are you thinking about? Do you know that for you to be considered to be a saver, you need to have 3 consecutive months of saving? Otherwise you're not a saver. You don't have a savings account. So it's not like sporadic savings. Those are the things that we educate people about, and it's about utilizing the employee benefits as your foundation and then building from that up, because that's where the tax portions and tax implications come in. So we're utilizing what benefits you've got, we build up from there, and the point is to make you save money. So your psychology, to answer your question, your psychology of money changes so that whatever you are transferred to, whatever comes your way from a wealth perspective, you are able to increase that with and not decrease it.
Zimasa, close us off with what advice you would give to your younger self about creating sustainable wealth without losing your cultural identity.
Wow, very interesting question. I always think that we first have to understand the relationship that the people who raised you, parents and obviously extended parents, what their relationship with money was and what they imparted onto you. So the cultural context is quite important, especially in the South African space. For some people, you have to build at home. No matter what you do, you go into the world, there's an expectation. We're not talking about black tax. We're talking about you having to build a new homestead. These are things that millions of South Africans, male, female, have to do. And it's an expectation that you're older now, and this is something that there's an expectation. So that's one. I think two, we need to have conversations with yourself and the habits that you have. You need to know what your crutch is so that you can understand how you make that purchase point decision. So if you know that you are a heavy online shopper, maybe you should download the apps and only use them on your laptop. Right? So you because the window shopping analogy is like the window's too close to you. The window's, you're always at the window, right? So it's always going to be saying to you, hey, there's a new special.
And the window sometimes talks.
Exactly. And it says that outfit you were looking at, it's now on sale. So you need to take yourself out of that. You need to understand your crutch and say, I take myself out of this situation, but I will still use what's available to me. Then the next thing is to say, you need to understand the life stage that you are at and what financial responsibilities and the implications onto the future those hold. So, but how does it affect me in 5 to 10 years? I think what we don't do well is to plan in tranches that we can control.
Yes.
You plan ahead, but then you create tasks on a monthly basis, on a weekly basis, so that you can action this plan and not dream of the land where you've got like 10 million rand investable. You say, I want to have 10 million rand investable in 10, 15 years, so that going closer to retirement or looking after my family a lot better will work like this. So then you say, if I was in 10, 15 years, I want 10 million rand. Let me come back to today. What do I need to start today, this week? You know, going to the canteen every time might not be the best thing for you, right? Make great meals at home. Take them to the office. What we're seeing is that a lot of people are trying to keep up with the Joneses. And that ultimately be your zwane. Be that family that sits and talks about finances and the future, what it looks like, but then bring the future closer and have actionable steps that take you in the right direction.
And say to your kids, we can't have this. Because your chommy down the road has this, we can't have it. Oh my goodness, what a fantastic conversation and such a great start to this podcast series, because it really is like a glimpse as to what more is to come. So thank you very much, and thank you very much for making the time.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Right, as we wrap up this first episode of The Independent Advantage, brought to you by ASI Financial Services, it really just reminds me of this great wealth transfer is going to happen, whether we like it or not. And it's not just about money, it's about intergenerational conversations, intergenerational workspaces, but also leadership that is now going to sit in the hands of young people, and how we as young people are going to use that to make sure that we can create policies and culture that can build wealth creation for ourselves and the people that we are leading. Now, in our next conversation, we're going to be exploring this idea further of what happens when independence is missing. How do you go around the tied products, the one-size-fits-all benefits, and of course, unchecked biases that happen quietly when your advice is not independent. So please do stay with us on this series. I promise you, it's going to be one that you're going to find so much value from. Now, if you did enjoy this conversation, I want you to also go and check out our sister podcast. It's called the ASI Biz Exchange, and that is geared for all business owners. If you're somebody, I think Verona mentioned it, we are all now entrepreneurial people, right? So if you're somebody who's geared for business, this is definitely the podcast for you. You can also listen to both the Independent Advantage and the Biz Exchange on Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. I will see you guys on the next one. Mwah.